majority of auto body repairs fall into the category of minor damage. Primarily, these are dents to metal panels that are too big to fill completely with plastic filler, but not major enough to require panel replacement. In this program, you'll see the tools, products, and techniques you'll need to repair minor damage like this. First, let's take a look at the tools and supplies you'll be using. This is a slide hammer and dent puller that is used in conjunction with a spot welder that welds studs onto a panel. After you've welded the studs onto a dent, you use the slide hammer to pull out the dent. Another variation of the slide hammer and dent puller is a weld-on pulling tool. This is actually two tools in one. The tip of the weld gun is welded to the dent. Then the slide hammer part of the tool is used to pull out the dent. You'll see step by step how to use both these tools to pull dents without drilling holes in the panel. You'll also be using body hammers and dollies of various sizes and configurations, a variety of dinging spoons, pry bars and picks, a sanding block or board, electric disc sander and sandpaper of various grits, plastic body filler and hardener, a body filler applicator and mixing board, glazing putty, sprayable polyfiller, surfacer, primer, and paint. Before you begin any repair, you must assess the extent of the damage. Look at the point and direction of impact to determine the starting point for your inspection. Look for scrapes, buckling, and panel misalignment or movement. You may have to remove some of the damaged parts to determine indirect damage to parts that are not immediately visible. Then decide if the extent of the damage requires panel repair or replacement. This is done by comparing the cost to repair the damage to the cost of replacing the damaged panel. This comparison should determine your course of action. For some parts, like quarter panels, which are welded or bonded into place, removing and installing a replacement is a very time-consuming task, maybe 12 to 14 hours plus the cost of the replacement part. Repairing rather than replacing is often a time and money-saving option. Once you've examined and assessed the extent of the damage, develop a detailed plan for repairing it. The repair plan will help you organize the parts and supplies you'll need before you need them. There's nothing more frustrating than starting a job only to find that you're out of a particular supply or you're missing a critical part or tool. The repair plan also helps organize the process so you don't forget any steps. If one critical step is missed, the whole job can fail. All right, let's assume you've done your assessment and repair plan. Displaced areas with no other damage can simply be moved back into place. Dents like this, or scratches, buckles, wrinkles, creases, or gouges, will require some additional work. But before you begin, take the proper safety precautions. Be sure you're wearing protective safety glasses and have a dust mask handy. You must also protect areas on the vehicle next to the repair area so they won't get damaged during the repair process. That means covering windows and safely storing trim and other parts near the repair area. Taking a few minutes to protect undamaged areas that could become damaged during a repair will save you a lot of time and money. If you damage parts of the vehicle, you'll have to repair them on your own time or pay to replace them. Once you've protected areas adjacent to the repair, you're ready to begin by roughing out the damaged areas, returning them as close as possible to the vehicle's original contours. We want to come within 1/8 of an inch of the original contour before applying any body filler. That means lowering high spots and raising low spots. A straight edge is a handy tool to reveal high and low areas. In most cases, we want to access the backside of the damaged panel if possible to push out low spots. That may mean removing interior panels and hardware. Once you've gained access to the back of the damaged area, there are several tools and techniques you can use to rough out the damage. Your first choices are body hammers and dollies like these. The surface of the hammer and the dolly should match as closely as possible to the original contours of the panel being repaired. Heavy hammers can be used for rough out, while lighter finishing hammers should be used for final shaping. There are two basic techniques for straightening metal with hammers and dollies: hammer-on dolly and hammer-off dolly. Let's take a look at each one. With the hammer-on dolly method, both the hammerhead and dolly surface must match the desired shape of the panel. If the area is flat, a flat dolly and hammer should be used. If it's curved, both the dolly and hammerhead should match the curve as closely as possible. Begin at the outside of the damaged area and work toward the center. Hold the dolly with light pressure against the back of the damage. Then use the hammer to strike the metal directly over the dolly. Begin with light blows, then increase force if needed. By starting light, then increasing the strength of your blows, you can better control the movement of the metal and avoid causing additional damage. Make sure the hammerhead hits the panel squarely in order to avoid making additional dents. Both the hammer and dolly should be moved slightly after each blow, with the new area of impact slightly overlapping the previous area. Allow the dolly to rebound after the hammer strikes it. This helps stretch low and shrunken spots. The harder you hit with the hammer, the more the metal will stretch. The second technique you can use to rough out damage is the hammer-off dolly. In this method, the dolly is placed under a low spot while the hammer is applied to a high spot just to the side of the dolly. This raises the low spot and lowers the high spot simultaneously without stretching the metal. This technique works well to rough out a large buckle. Again, start at the edge and work in toward the center of the damage. During this process, you'll probably need to change the dollies and hammers you use. Once the area has been brought back close to its original shape, use the hammer-on dolly method to finish shaping before applying filler. If you have a raised area, you need to shrink the metal to restore the original contour. To do that, you can use a hammer like this with a dolly behind it. This hammer creates a pattern that takes up additional metal and shrinks the area. The harder you hit, the more the metal will shrink. Use of hammers and dollies requires access to the backside of the panel. If you're unable to reach the backside, there are other tools you can use. For example, you can use a pick hammer to shrink high areas to the original contour. Start on the edge and work toward the middle. Begin with lighter blows. You can always increase the strength of your blows, but blows that are too hard will just mean more damage for you to fix. Keep the pick marks close together for best results. Continue using the pick hammer until the raised area has been restored close to the original contours. Dinging spoons, picks, and pry bars are used to lift a low spot when the back of the panel is not easily accessible with a dolly. In spring hammering, a dinging or slapping spoon like this is held firmly against the back of a ridge or crease. A bumping hammer is used to hit the surface of a ridge or buckle, working down high spots. Use the slapping spoon on the backside to bump out low spots when you don't have room to swing a hammer. Picks can be used to push or pry up metal in areas that can't be reached with spoons. They can often fit through existing holes, eliminating the need to remove interior trim or panels to reach the damaged area. But when you use a pick, be careful not to overstretch the metal. Remember, whenever you're straightening metal, start with a light touch, small taps, light pressure, and then work up to harder blows if needed. Now, there are times when you just can't get behind a dent to push it out. In these cases, we pull it out. Remember our stud and spot welder tools? Let's see how they work. A stud spot welder allows you to take metal studs like this, spot weld them onto the dent, and pull it out with a slide hammer. Before you can do that, you must remove the paint from the damaged area. Be sure to put on your dust mask before you do. Use a 36 or 40 grit grinding disc to grind off any remaining paint, weld scale, or corrosion in the patch area. Keep the grinder moving and try to remove as little of the metal as possible. Blow away the dust with compressed air and use a tack cloth to wipe away remaining dust particles. Insert a stud into the end of the stud spot welding gun. Press the gun tip to the area you want to raise and pull the trigger. The stud will be firmly welded to the dent. You should attach enough pins to bring the entire damaged area close to its original contours. Now, beginning at the edge, attach the slide hammer to each stud and pull out the dent. Continue this process until you've roughed out the dent within 1/8 of an inch of the original contour. Then, snip off and grind down the pins. With the stud spot welder, you never need to punch or drill holes in a panel. Holes destroy rust proofing and provide an ideal spot for corrosion to set in, so never drill holes in a panel you're repairing. Another variation of the stud spot welder is a combination spot welder dent puller tool, which is actually 2 tools in 1. To use this tool, make sure paint, dirt, and grease are removed from the damaged area. Clamp the ground cable to bare metal close to the repair. Press the tip of the gun against the edge of the dent and pull the trigger. The tip is now welded to the panel. Use the slide hammer part of the tool to pull out the dent. When you're finished, twist the gun to break the weld. Continue to work from the edge to the center until you've roughed out the damage close to the original contours. As I mentioned before, our goal is to come within 1/8 inch or less of the original surface contour before applying the filler. The closer you come to this, the less filler you'll have to use. The less filler you use, the better the repair will be. Okay, so now that you've roughed out the contours, you're ready to prepare for filler. One of the most important steps to ensuring the success of the body filler is proper surface preparation. You got to remove all dirt, grime, grease, road tar, and any silicone from automotive waxes. Clean the area by first blowing away dust or by using a wax and grease remover. Using a 36 or 40 grit grinding disc, grind off any remaining paint, weld scale, or corrosion in the patch area. Blow away the dust with compressed air and use a tack cloth to wipe away remaining dust particles. Don't use solvents to clean the area. Solvent residue can mix with filler and cause failure of the patch. The next stage, preparing the filler, is critical to the success of the job. Be sure you wear rubber or vinyl gloves to prepare and apply the filler. You'll need filler and hardener that are manufactured by the same company and go together. Mix the can of filler to uniform consistency. Then mix the hardener by kneading the tube, squeezing it back and forth. Remove the desired amount of filler and place it on a filler mixing board made of glass, plastic, or metal. Replace the lid on the filler container immediately to keep liquids from evaporating. Refer to the manufacturer's instructions to determine the correct amount of hardener to add to the plastic filler. It's important that you get the exact proportions. Adding too much or too little hardener will result in failure of the filler. It won't dry or cure properly, and you'll have to scrape it off and start over. Mix the filler and hardener together using a back and forth scraping motion, but don't stir the mixture. This will cause air bubbles to form. Be sure to use a clean spreader. If you use a dirty one, dirt or dust will get mixed into the filler and cause grooves on the surface of the repair. Mix the filler until it becomes a uniform color. If it isn't properly mixed, soft spots will form on your patch, causing you to have to scrape off and start over. Once the filler is properly mixed, apply a thin coat working side to side. Then spread up and down. Feather the edges out at least 3 inches beyond the edge of the damage. Allow the filler to cure about 10 to 15 minutes at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, longer at lower temperatures and high humidity. When the patch is cured, sand it down with 40 grit. You can use a dual-action power sander for the initial sanding. Check to see if you have any low spots. If more filler is needed, blow off or wipe away dust, then apply filler to match the contours of the panel. Let it cure, and sand again with 40 grit. When you've determined that no additional filler is needed, finish by hand sanding with 180 grit. Feather edge the surrounding paint using 180 to 240 grit. Blow off dust, then apply a degreaser. Surfacer is the material which fills in the fine grooves left from sanding and promotes the adhesion of the final finish. However, before you apply Surfacer, check to see if there's any bare metal showing. Bare metal must be primed before Surfacer is applied. Primer promotes adhesion of the Surfacer. If you don't prime bare metal areas, you run the risk of your paint peeling off later on. Now you're ready to apply the Surfacer. Spray it on until the repair area is covered, basically any areas you've sanded, and then feather it out just a few inches beyond that. When it's dry, apply a dry guide coat. Sand the entire area with the correct grit for the final finish you've chosen, either 600 grit wet sanding or 400 grit dry. After sanding, the guide coat will reveal any remaining high or low spots. If there's no remaining high or low spots, wash the area with water and wipe dry with a clean lint-free cloth. Spray on degreaser and wipe dry. Occasionally, even after you've applied one or more coats of body filler, you may see little pinholes in the surface. Also, deeper scratches like these can't be buffed out. Both must be filled before applying the final finish. For these situations, normal body filler is too coarse to use as a filler. We need something finer. That's where glazing putty and sprayable poly filler come in. Let's take a look at how to use both of these products. First, glazing putty. Like other filler materials, glazing putty comes in two parts, the filler and the hardener or catalyst. Both parts must be mixed in proper proportions before use. Just check the instructions on the product you're using for the recommended proportions. Mix the two parts thoroughly, then apply with a putty knife or plastic spreader. Spread the putty until the scratch is filled. Allow the putty to cure, then sand with 80 grit then 180 grit until the repair area is smooth. As with other body repairs, be sure to prime any bare metal, then spray on surfacer to fill any remaining fine lines from sanding. When the surfacer is dry, apply another dry guide coat. Then sand the entire area with the correct grit for the final finish you've chosen, either 600 grit wet sanding or 400 grit dry. If the guide coat doesn't reveal any high or low spots, you're ready to apply the final finish. You can also apply the glazing putty to fill fine pinholes, or you can try another product, sprayable polyfiller. Sprayable polyfiller is a liquid which makes it ideal for very fine holes and scratches. Like other filler products, it comes in two parts that must be mixed together in proper proportions. Be sure to consult the manufacturer's instructions. Unlike the other body fillers we've seen, this product is sprayed on rather than applied with a putty knife or spreader. It fills in all the pinholes and minute scratches not taken care of with body filler or glazing putty. When it's cured, hand sand with 80 grit, then 180 grit, feathering out to adjacent areas. Apply primer if needed and surfacer as we showed earlier, and you're ready for the final finish. And that's it. Now you have the basic information you need to repair minor dents and scratches. In this program, you've learned how to identify minor damage to a vehicle and prepare a plan for accomplishing the repair. You've learned the tools used to repair minor damage and how to use them. You've learned how to prepare the surface of a panel for repair and restore the rough contours before applying body filler. You've learned how to apply body filler and surfacer and all the repair steps before the final finish. You've also learned when and how to apply glazing putty and sprayable polyfiller. The repair of minor panel damage is probably the most common task you'll encounter in collision repair. And now you know how to do it. Keep practicing and you'll be knocking out those dings and scratches in no time.